Welcome, 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 welcome. Welcome to the weird and the wonderful with Strange Bones. That's me. And tonight we need to orient ourselves just a little bit. Uh, for those of us who are not so well clued up on all of the geography that may or may not be of import. The question is, where are we? And the answer to that is, if you find the United Kingdom and you head east from the lower part by London, as you hit the European continent, you will find yourself in a line, the Netherlands, Belgium, and France. And if you head further east, you will get Denmark, Germany, and Switzerland, and right down below that, Italy. But if you head even further east, you will get what ultimately we will refer to as the Slavic states. All those interesting places that include Romania, for example, Moldova, Poland, Belarus, Czechia, and Slovakia. But even further east yet, but still before you hit Russia, you will find the Ukraine. Now, the Ukraine is actually quite a large country by and large. It is bigger than France. It is bigger than Spain. It's a pretty large country. On most of its sides, it is connected to the continent, including Russia on the one side. It is connected to Belarus, Poland, Slovakia, Hungary, Romania, and Moldavia. But on its lowest side, of course, it is connected to the Black Sea. So, as a country, it's quite an interesting one, and I think it's one that we will enjoy exploring. Um, what can we say about it? Well, what we can say is this. It has certainly, of course, been in the news of late, what with all the goings on, as you can imagine. Its capital is Kiev. It is the largest country in Europe after Russia. Um, it absolutely has a lot of words which I can almost guarantee to you all I am going to butcher willfully during this during this live, because it is not the easiest language in the world by any means whatsoever. And I can honestly tell you that I, for one, do not speak it. So we will offer a great deal of apologies in advance, um, purely because I will never manage to be able to say all the words correctly. But we will do our best. We will do our best. Let us say that. Um, and we will see what we can do. So, welcome to you all. It's fantastic to have you with me. And as always, on our channel, what we do is We talk about the supernatural and the paranormal, and we see what might be out there and perhaps whether or not there is any truth to the stories and our opinions, whether or not we think that it is something worthy of uh, being concerned about, or if perhaps it is nothing more than a story. We must remember that on this channel we have one rule, and that is please, please be polite, or I will be forced to give you the boot. We do not expect you to agree or disagree. You are more than welcome and indeed encouraged to like, subscribe, comment, and do all of those fun things that support the channel. We need all the support that we can get, so we would love to have you on board and doing along with us. And we would love to hear your opinions as well. Why not? What is the point of doing a channel like this if we don't engage? So do so. I do hope you enjoy what we do. But as I've said, today we are talking Ukraine. Ukraine is known for its rich history and folklore, with a lot of different legends, which include all kinds of paranormal activity, including Pirepsi Castle, known for the legendary woman in white, which we have encountered a number of times around the world. It seems that um, this particular form of paranormal experience is one that is not surprising at all. Um, there is the Lissa Mountain in Kiev, which is associated with both witches and executions, and quite a few other interesting spots that I think very probably will give us rich fodder to talk about, and I'm quite looking forward to it. And as we go along, uh, we will talk about the different places like the Dead Lake, uh, Olesko Castle, the Odessa Catacombs, and Sevakova Mountain, and the Ternopil Haunted House, which of course has failed in a huge way by committing one of the cardinal errors if you want to avoid hauntings, which is to say that it is built on the site of an old cemetery. And everybody knows that if you go ahead and do that, you are absolutely going to be getting ghosts. There's no doubt about it. So we are certainly going to expect something there. There is also the Vinnytsia Psychiatric Hospital, uh, which apparently is known for its cruel and unusual treatment methods. And that, again, is something which I think promises to be a place where ghosts might indeed uh, arise. So let's kick this off and see what interesting things we can find to perhaps terrify. But just before we do, I'm going to bring up a story which was shared with me today, and I think which you will all find interesting and amusing. We are all familiar, I'm sure, with what we can refer to as fairy tales. Nice little stories that we tell the kiddies. Cute sorts of things for fun, as you well know. But are they? Are they? Now, something which was an interesting discovery for me, and which I absolutely did enjoy in a great many ways was the discovery um, about the Brothers Grimm. Now, as you well know, the Brothers Grimm are most famous for their collections of fairy tales. However, however, thank you very, very much for those likes. I appreciate that greatly. The more the merrier. You're wonderful people. When it comes to fairy tales, where do the stories come from? And the first and most interesting point that needs to be made is that the Brothers Grimm never wrote any of their fairy tales. They did not write them, they wrote them down. And there is a very important distinction there, because what they were in fact linguists and philologists, and they collected stories from around Germany and such areas and made them up in order to preserve folklore. Now, you might say, well, what's that got to do with the difference? Well, the difference is this. They're important, of course, because the stories come from real places around Germany. And, for example, as we discovered in our last live, which was on Germany, that there is a place called Hameln, or Hamlin, as it is referred to in the Pied Piper of Hamelin. And in fact, the roots of the story, while quite severely Disneyfied nowadays, lie in truth. We also know that in Germany there really is a Castle Frankenstein, and the mad doctor of Castle Frankenstein really did exist. The story is a story, but it is based on a truth. And so we start to ask ourselves, how many other fairy tales are actually true? Well, here is one that was told to me today. Did you know that the tooth fairy is real? What do you say, Tyra? Welcome, welcome, and ZFC. Glad to have you guys on board. Well, here's a story about the tooth fairy. And while these days it's a modern twinkly little fairy with glitter that collects the teeth of little kiddies and leaves them money in return, the truth actually is quite a bit darker. And what is this dark truth? Well, in fact, you may not be surprised to discover that actually the tooth fairy originates in America, in a small southern town. And it began with a rather strange occurrence. One day, around 100 or so years ago, the young man woke up, stretched, felt a little dizzy and headachy, and thought, I don't feel so good. And then discovered most of his teeth were missing. Now, he had had them when he had gone to bed, and as you can imagine, he was quite concerned to wake up without them. His jaw ached, his head pounded. Well, over the next few days, as it turns out, he found he was not the only one. More and more people were waking up feeling sick and headachy and without their teeth. The local sheriff was contacted, and, well, he didn't quite know what to do. I mean, it's one thing to say, I've been robbed. It's quite another to say, my teeth have been stolen. Well, this went on for some time until, while it was of course, quite a small town at the time, most of the town had lost their teeth. And this was now a serious concern. Well, some weeks down the line, a young man was fixing to get a little bit more serious with his young lady. And he was rather fancying her, and he wanted to do right by her and make sure that, in fact, he courted her proper like. And he decided the best way to let her know that he was quite serious about walking out with her, he went on into town to find her some fine gift. Now, as you can imagine, in the older days, in a small town in southern United States, it wasn't the United States at the time, it was the southern states. There wasn't a lot of options, so you went and found something interesting and were pleased with what you got. And in an effort to please her, he thought, you know what would be great? Nice jewelry. Well, he was looking around. He didn't find much, and he thought long and hard about it. And when he went home that night, he said, tomorrow, I'm going to find me a good piece of jewelry. Nothing too fancy, nothing too serious. A necklace would be great. Well, he went to sleep. When he woke up in the morning, his head it was pounding something wicked. He did not feel well at all, and he was not very pleased with life. He staggered off to the bathroom to wash his face, and looking in the mirror, he realized to his horror, half his teeth were gone. Now, what could he do? I mean, they were gone. And he decided, well, I'm going to have to get a really good present for my fine young lady, because I don't want her now thinking, here's a guy with no teeth. So he went on into town on a mission. He was going to find something. But as he's getting ready to leave his house, uh, he realizes standing in the doorway to his bedroom is an old woman. Now, he's still a bit mazed and still a bit not too sure on his feet. And he's like, well, who the hell are you? And she gives him this smile and says in a little old lady voice, why, thank ye, honey bun, and disappears. Well, by the time he gets on out, he's now very confused. He's heard the stories, didn't really believe them, but now he has to because his teeth are gone too. Well, around town he goes and he's looking up and down, and he spots this little stall in the corner where there's this sweet little old lady sitting, selling jewelry. And he goes on over and he finds a very unusual carved bone necklace. And he buys it. It's a little pricey, but for his young lady, nothing but the best. Pays the woman, and as he's walking away, she says to him, thank you for your patronage, honey bun. Well, he's halfway down the street, and he suddenly thinks to himself, hold on. And he spots the sheriff walking by, and he grabs the sheriff and he says, I think I know what's going on. You got to come with me now. And they rush on back. And as they get there, hey Josh, how you doing? As they get there, there's the table where the stall was, And on the table is a little piece of paper, but there ain't no old lady selling nothing. And he picks up the paper and reads it. And on it says, "Hey, honey bun, tell your children to keep their teeth clean." And they never did find out who she was. Josh 178, you missed the story. It was a story of the origins of the tales of the Tooth Fairy. And apparently, as far as I could find out, they say that it's true. So maybe more of our fairy tales are a lot more true than we actually thought. Hey, Jason, welcome. So, a little thought for you next time you hear a fairy tale, that maybe there is a little bit more truth in it than you actually ever realized. But with that thought in our head, we are doing our rounds around the world and checking out on the paranormal and supernatural in different countries and cultures to see if there is any similarities between the different places, or perhaps not, and of course what it might mean. And in doing that, today we are dealing with the Ukraine. And the first place we are going to talk about is the Castle Pirhitsi. Very interesting and rather old place that back in the day was a lavish royal residence, home to treasured art and history. But over the centuries, it has been attacked, looted, burned many times, and finally is all but abandoned and is now considered to be the most haunted castle in the Ukraine. So let's see what we can find out about it. Now, Pirhitsi Castle is quite near to the city of Lviv in the Ukraine. It is very much neglected, rather sadly. Out in the countryside, quite beautiful around, a palace-like complex. But not anymore. But the building remains standing, waiting, and perhaps not as empty as you might think. So it gets its title as one of the most haunted for various reasons, but also one of the most valuable palace castle complexes in the eastern borderlands. The Italian architect Andrea Delacroix, in cooperation with a French-Polish architect, designed the castle in the 17th century for the hetman of the Polish-Lithuanian crown. The construction took place between 1635 and 1640, and it was built basically not for defensive purposes or really for any practical use, but as a place of leisure. So it was far more palatial than most such castles, and Polish leaders used the residence well into the 18th century for recreation and grand events. Valuable art filled the interiors of the castles during its prominence, and the different halls, yes, that's multiple. Why do I think, okay, Jason, great question. And in fact, before we go on with the castle, let's actually cover this because this matters. Okay. So, one thing that we have established when it comes to ghosts, okay, why, I mean, if you think about it, over the centuries, millions and millions and billions of people have died. Why do we not have millions and billions of ghosts? And the reason is this. It seems that for a ghost to form, much thanks for the likes there. For a ghost to form, you need a couple of things. Number one, you need for a great deal of emotion at the time of death. And the emotion must be that kind of emotion that causes a person to refuse to leave for some reason. The greater the emotion, the stronger the ghost. Now, if when you die, you basically think to yourself, you know what? Hey, I've had a good life. You won't become a ghost. You will move on to wherever you go after you die, which is, of course, dependent on whatever religion you believe in, etc., etc. But when you die with a great deal of, I really don't want to die, that's when you have the opportunity for a ghost to form. Now, where do you get that much emotion? Well, number one, hospitals, people who are really clinging to life, who do not want to die. And of course, the other criterion, which I am assuming should be a reasonably obvious one, is that you need to die at that place or near that place, or be very connected to that place for you to be able to haunt it. G-String, you're back. Welcome, welcome. Glad to have you. We always like to see you around. So you need this strong emotion, which, yes, in a hospital, on any kind of battlefield where tensions are really strong, that right there is another reason. Lots of anger, lots of emotion in a battle. So, battlefields, hospitals, top two places. Third top place, roads. Why roads? Now, there isn't a lot of anger or regret, but there's a lot of tragedy. And deep sorrow is just as strong in its own way, allowing for a ghost to form. Now, of course, your next question, which is the logical next one, you are absolutely correct. Why aren't people haunted? Is answered like this. Much thanks, Kreshkix, for the shares there. I do appreciate. And NGZ Boris, welcome, welcome. Glad to see you on. Okay, people can be haunted. It depends on how the deceased died as to who may become haunted. The three things that can be haunted are a place, an object, or a person. Now, for a person to be haunted, there must be a very serious attachment between the ghost and the person. Now, what makes that attachment? That's very arguable and it may change dependent on. I do know somebody that went to a very haunted place, possibly quite foolishly, and very possibly did odd things. In that regard, and came home with an attached ghost and had to be exorcised. Now, you ask, if a mother dies during childbirth, would she haunt the child or the hospital? The answer depends. It could be either. However, if the mother did haunt the child, I would argue that it is most likely that it would be a benevolent haunting rather than a malevolent haunting. But it could be the hospital if she blamed them more. And there doesn't have to be logical reason, keep in mind. There needs to be emotional reason. So those are the possibilities. But again, if she was completely resigned to the fact and went with a calmer spirit, if you will, then she would not become a ghost, no matter what. So there are a number of possibilities. Now, when it's a place, you can avoid the ghost simply because you just don't go to that place. If it's a person, you may need to be exorcised in some way. But the third category, of course, is an object, and that makes our fourth most likely place to be haunted, which is a museum. And why a museum? Because they go and gather up all kinds of old artifacts and stick them in one place. So it is not actually the place being haunted, but rather some of the artifacts. And if you look at all the stories around the world, you quickly find out that wherever they happen, those five are your 4 or 5 are the top places where ghosts are likely to occur. So hospitals, battlefields, castles, roads, museums. Now, of course, a ghost could appear anywhere, dependent on what happened and where it happened, and so on and so forth. There was a very interesting place that we covered. You took the words right out of my mouth. Right there, Kyra. What about prisons? Well, prisons absolutely do get haunted, especially ones where they had their, I suppose it seems a bit crass to say it like this, but in-house executions. So where people, if they were on death row, were executed in the prison, yes, prisons are right up there. Do you need to exercise a benevolent ghost? Not really. I think by and large, a great many hauntings that at least I've encountered or read stories about where the ghosts are not malevolent or bad, okay? Where they are good, the biggest scare of it is the fact that you really didn't expect to see a ghost. They don't cause any harm, and really, is there any problem at all? No. Do I have any personal stories to prove? Okay, well, Kyra, the problem is this. Proving is very difficult if you mean in the sense of I can actually give you evidence that it does. However, I have seen a number of things that has proved it to me. I couldn't then reprove it to you for quite a few different reasons, but I am convinced. And just as an example, here is one for you that happened to me. Okay. Now, many years ago, was in fact a monk in the Catholic Church. I have since left. But at the time, I was working in northern KwaZulu-Natal. I was working alongside the official exorcist for KwaZulu-Natal, so that you know. And I was staying right out on one of the missions because the order to which I belonged were missionaries, and that's where they worked as well. Now, this will answer in part you as well, Jason, because yes, you can speak to ghosts sometimes. Can you record one? Arguable, possibly. So while I was out there, I did encounter a ghost. I won't go into the entire story about it because it's actually quite a long one. Maybe we will one day. It's certainly a story worth hearing. But I encountered a ghost in the building wherein I was staying. Karina, you're here. Hello. Sorry, guys. Hey, good friend of mine. Glad to have you. Okay, so this ghost I managed to establish was a young schoolgirl. And now I figured that out through a number of different things, which included the fact I recognized the sound of her shoes initially, and I realized they were school shoes. And I was living at the time in this area where 90% of people didn't wear shoes until they were adults. They just didn't, but would wear them to go to school. That was the only real time they bothered. So that was my first clue. There were several other clues as well. And I figured out that this young girl died in the river next to the place. Okay. And there were reasons for that as well. But I was staying at the time with the Archbishop of KwaZulu-Natal for the Catholic Church. And he was an amazing guy. He really was. He had an IQ of somewhere up around 200. He had an eidetic memory, and I mean, brilliant guy. And you could not put one past him. He was quite an old fellow. He was well into his 60s, 70s when I was there. But he had literally been the guy that had, in many cases, baptized the people, married the people, and then buried the people in the community. He had worked there that long. An amazing fellow. But he knew the place backwards. And he was one of the few outsiders that the locals would trust to tell things to. Now, it's a very closed community. They're wonderful people, but they don't go public with their personal stuff. It's just how they are. And he knew about the murder of this girl. And, well, they weren't completely certain it was a murder. They thought it might have been, but it was still being investigated. It was very fresh. Now, I had just come up to do some work up there, so nobody would speak to me about that, obviously. And I remember I went and I sat down to breakfast with this guy, and he looks at me, and he was sharp like that. He says, so, something's on your mind. So I says to him, you know what? There was a death here in the last couple of weeks or in the last month, wasn't there? And he goes very quiet. And he looks at me and he says, for what reason would you say that? And I said, and it was a young girl, wasn't it? And he says to me, that's remarkably specific. And I said, it was a young girl from the local school. And she died in the river. And then he was quiet for quite a long time. And he says to me, I know for an absolute fact that nobody told you any of that. And I know for an absolute fact that there is no way you have of knowing it. So would you like to tell me how it is that you know it? And I said, well, I saw her last night. And he gave me a very long and thoughtful look and said, I think perhaps in Mass we should offer up some extra prayers for her soul. uh, so, is there something out there? Yes. What is it? Well, I think it could be one of several things. In this case, I really think it was a ghost. She absolutely was a young Zulu girl. She did not speak English, and when I tried to talk to her in English, I got no response whatsoever. When I tried to speak to her in Zulu, she not only responded but came running up to me, which, as you can imagine, was a little one of these moments, and I'm sure you know what that means. Can a ghost eventually leave the place they're haunting? If you mean move on, yes. It seems when the emotional attachment fades or goes or is satisfied in some way, dependent on the reason and the ghost, then they go on to whatever they go on to, as they should. Can they leave the place if you're talking? Well, if the ghost is haunting a place, not a person or object, no, not usually. If they somehow are strong enough or angry enough that they are able to attach to a person, then they can go with the person. But it seems that they are limited in their range, if you will, as to how far from the haunted place or person or object that they can go. Why is it that some ghosts are trapped in specific areas? It has to do with where they died, or if they have a really strong emotional attachment to a specific place. So, if you are executed in a prison, as you mentioned earlier, Kyra, then they are attached to the prison because that is the source of their anger, their frustration, etc. So that's what traps them. They're essentially trapped by their own reason that they're able to stay. Now, if ghosts are real, what about spirits? Well, that's the reason why not only do we talk about ghosts on this channel, we also talk about what we call cryptids, which basically includes all of those things that science says doesn't exist or has not proved exists, but a lot of people think do, which includes spirits and more. Now, you get two kinds of spirit, at least in theory, okay? Proving that is obviously very hard, and it does depend on your religion. Okay, so your first kind of spirit is what we will call a mundane spirit. Why do they not cross over? How do it come they stay in the real world? Because of this emotional attachment, Kyra. It's because they will not go on for some reason, though they should. That's basically why. Okay, so two kinds of spirit. The first is what we call mundane spirits. Now, mundane not in the sense of boring, but mundane from the Latin mundus, meaning of the world. Okay, so mundane spirits are spirits of this world. You then also get, allegedly, arguably, celestial spirits. Celestial spirits are not spirits of this world, but can enter it sometimes. Now, what is an example? Well, if you are a Christian, angels and demons are both celestial spirits, one being good, one being bad. Okay. Now they can enter the world under certain rules, dependent on how you view the religion, etc. But they do not belong to the world the way a spirit of this world would. Ghosts are a kind of mundane spirit. They might be dead, but they do come from here. Okay, now, very important question. Are mirrors facing each other portals? Well, we need to understand a little bit about the history of mirrors. I know that sounds very strange, but here's the thing. Okay, quick question for you guys. What is it that you use to kill a werewolf? The answer, of course, is a silver bullet, right? A weapon, yeah, sure. A silver bullet. So, why silver? Well, according to quite a lot of different and completely unrelated religions, silver is particularly damaging or dangerous to spiritual things. And for this very reason, many holy items are made out of silver. It's a prominent choice of metal. We also know, in fact, in very real scientific life, silver is one of those weird things, like gold, incidentally, that cannot hold contagion. I know that sounds weird. So let's say you've got an infected eye and you poke your eye. Now the infection is on your finger. If you poke my eye, you can transfer your infection to me. Okay, infection doesn't adhere to silver or gold. Why? I'm not sure. That's why nowadays you can get those special ointments or plasters with colloidal silver in them, because it rejects infection and causes much faster healing. So there's a certain amount of scientific truth that bad things don't attach to silver and gold. Okay, so arguably a gold bullet should kill a werewolf too. We also know that vampires are against silver. We know from a number of pagan religions from way back when that silver was considered holy. Now, what you might not know is that when mirrors were originally made using glass, they were backed with silver. And therefore, they interfered with or affected the supernatural. I will answer that, Kyra, in a brief moment. Let me finish this one. Okay, so if silver can interfere with or affect the supernatural or paranormal, and you are using two silver-backed mirrors. Modern age, I'm sorry, they don't back mirrors with silver, so modern mirrors probably won't work very well. But proper old silver-backed mirrors would create a place between them that is a focus point, just like use a magnifying glass for the sun and it focuses to a point. You're doing it by using two mirrors on the paranormal and therefore opening a portal. That's the theory. Does it work? Not sure. Surya Nyeshi, what's up? Yes, shout out, shout out. You know what? I'm going to keep your name there, and I will give a shout out to your account just like that. There we go. Done and done, sir. I hope you appreciate. Now, where did I obtain my information? Well, this is a bit of a long story. I naturally seem to have an ability to see ghosts. Not all the time, but a lot of the time, and more than most people. Now, I grew up with two parents that were both scientists, and if you couldn't poke it with a stick, it wasn't real. So when I went to them and said, there's something in the corner of the room, their immediate answer was, don't be silly, or you're having nightmares. Have some nice milk and go to bed. So I got no help there. When I got older and got involved with the church, I discovered that on the one hand, they're like, yep, sure, these things exist. No, we don't talk about it. And of course, that immediately to me was like a major red flag. And I'm like, dude, no, you can't tell me that. I need answers. I need something at least to go on. So I started researching, and I went on for a very long time indeed, doing quite a lot of research, and have continued to this day to do so, because I want to know. I'm a curious kind of guy, I suppose. I need to know what's going on. Now, your next question there, Jason, do spirits get stronger if more people know of them, or do they stay the same? I'm going to throw it out there and say I'm going to have to add that question to the rather long growing list of questions that we have about these sorts of things, because I don't have an answer for you. I have had people tell me that they do, and I have people that tell me that they don't. So, not entirely certain, and would very much like to know. I'm doing more research as I go along, and I absolutely do intend to find out, because I think it's a very important question. Um, it's possible, if they do, that might be the reason why major institutions always tell you that don't worry about it, just ignore it, don't get involved. Now, I know for a fact in the Catholic Church they do that. I know because I have a couple of people from various religions that join this channel now and then, and one of my good friends on this channel is in fact a Muslim, and he says that was exactly his experience as well within Islam. I also know a couple of Hindus, and they have told me exactly the same thing. Yeah, sure, it does exist. No, we don't talk about it. So perhaps if it is the case that they do, then maybe. Now, okay, do ghosts interact with spirits? I don't know, actually. I've never heard of that being the case in modern stories. In ancient mythology, especially Greek, yes, they do all the time. Can ghosts become spirits? No, I don't believe that. In my experience, a thing is what it is. So, yes. Now, there's an answer to you from Moonglosser. Yes, mirrors are a portal. Yeah, that's a very common belief. And there may well be good reason for that belief. Is it provable? Hard to say. I'd like to give you a definitive answer. I'm inclined strongly to the yes, but proving it would be very, very difficult. I think it would be hard to really prove. But I think it's reasonable to assume that yes. So yes. Oh, thanks for the love there, Karina. I always appreciate it. There you go, everybody. Follow on with Karina's lead and give us lots of likes and roses and all the love in the world, because it makes the channel strong. So, next question was, if somebody becomes a ghost in the middle of nowhere and have a strong emotional connection, can they go anywhere? I am inclined to say not anywhere, but yes, elsewhere. And again, it's your emotive connection. So, where, let's say they died out in the middle of nowhere, but really, 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 really wanted to go home, they might be able to manifest at home. Say, for example, um, I think it does depend on the strengths of the individual ghost and the amount of energy in it. So, yes. Now, Mundloza has said this: through the years of my journey, I've come across many trapped spirits, and most are here to convey messages. Yes, I would say, in terms of the benevolent ones, I would agree. They've got some last thing that they want said or done, which will allow them to move on. And once it's done, they generally do. The problem is when it's never done and the poor thing's left stuck. So yes, I am strongly of the opinion. We cannot prove, but I'm strongly in agreement right there. Now, can ghosts get rid of other ghosts? And if there's one, can others still pop up? Well, here's an interesting thing that came up in a story we encountered in South America in Chile. And it, no, I tell a lie. It was in Wales, in England. We did Wales. Okay, so basically what happened, there was a particular inn that way back in the day had started off as a house, then it became a government building, and then it was used as a magistrate's court. And then partway through that time, when somebody was found guilty and executed, they were executed in the building right there. Years move on, it was restored, rebuilt, and it eventually became a pub and a hotel. And they had a couple of different ghosts. It was a very old building, a couple of 100 years old. So a lot of history to it. And amongst other things, one of the ghosts was of a little girl that died falling off the upper story banisters and fell down. And she was a sweet little ghost, never caused any trouble. Great. But one of the ghosts was the ghost of one of the prisoners who was executed there. And he was a real work. He was a serial killer, a serious bandit and cattle rustler, and he had murdered like 30 or 40 people in his life. He was a really nasty fellow. And according to the people that now run the place, the bad ghost chases and bullies the little girl ghost, and she hides to avoid him. So it seems that ghosts do interrupt other ghosts, and they can be nasty, and there is a certain amount of possibility because it seems that ghosts need energy to manifest, which is why you get cold spots. They're drawing energy in to be able to interact with the physical world. So, excuse me, just so absolutely yes. Um, they need energy, and it seems that they can steal it from each other. Um, at least if the stories are true of that place, and I have no reason to think they won't. Um, yeah, ghosts can be quite nasty to other ghosts. Um, okay, lovely question, and I have got an answer for you. It's very, very rare. And yes, as Mundlosa says, uh, one often feels drains in the presence of a spirit. Yes, for that reason. We have a lot of energy. We know this. We generate it as living beings. So, yes, we can be a bit of a snack in that regard. Can a ghost have a strong emotional connection to another ghost that keeps it there? And the answer is categorically yes, and I will tell you why. In my own experience, I think it's very rare that ghosts do interact by and large because I think it's just too hard for them. But there was an old couple that owned a farmhouse in South Africa, in Richmond, and they were massively in love to the degree that they were actually spoken of around the area as being the perfect couple. And the house is still in the family to this day. It is now a restaurant, and a very, very good one. They have killer coffee and the most divine cheesecake, in case you are wondering. Um, but their ghosts never left. And they didn't stick around because of bad reason. They were just so happy together that they never felt the need to move on. And they are still there to this day, this little old man and this little old woman. And they enjoy coming out, even during the day, weirdly enough, and looking out at all the oblivious people who are having coffee and cake in the garden, and they enjoy it, and they have an absolutely wonderful time. And they, as far as I could tell when I saw them, they're very, very happy. And if you go to that restaurant, it has the most delightful feeling about it. It's not draining at all, which is weird. Normally, as Mundloza says, you will feel drained. But in this specific case, you actually feel really good. It's the most relaxing, wonderful place ever to visit. And I suspect it's because it is haunted by two incredibly happy ghosts that have been there since sometime in the 18th century. Okay, now there's an interesting question for you. Is she bad? You've tried cleansing, but would you want to cleanse her? Or would it be not better, in fact, to just speak directly to her and explain that she does need to move on? Some people I've found don't realize that they are, in fact, dead, and therefore they don't know what to do. I imagine it's a fairly traumatic and confusing situation. So maybe they just don't know. And if you explained, they would go. Can a ghost reappear? Not too sure um, of your question, Jason. Rephrase it, please. Moondloser, understandable. She's scared. But maybe that's the point. If you, instead of trying to cleanse it, chatted, explained, made her feel safer, and helped her realize it's okay to move. That's really the thing. Or if she's not being a problem, then hey, let her stay. Why not? There are worse people to have as a roommate. At least they're cheap to feed. So, yeah. Okay, I see what you're asking. Um, hmm. Okay. No, in my experience, if the exorcism is successful, then it's successful and they are moved on. It is possible that an exorcism is not successful, and I have encountered occasions where that has been the case. So once it's gone, it's largely gone. Um, okay, understood, Mundlosa. That absolutely would, yeah, I get that. That it is anxiety inducing and draining. And for that reason, that's why I say instead of going the hardcore route straight off, I would try and chat and calm and just as you would a person. And generally, that has far better results. Can a ghost physically hurt you? Yes. Not always. So, here's how it works, okay? When you're talking ghost, you get ranks. And obviously, it's a pleasure there, Mundlosa. Obviously, this is not an exact ranking system. Uh, it's a lot grayer and up and down than this. But essentially, the weakest form of ghost. Karina, you're a love. Thank you for that. The weakest form of ghost can't manifest, can't make noises. They appear as what we call an orb. It's the absolute lowest level with the minimum amount of energy. And I suppose in many ways that's the saddest because they haven't moved, but at the same time, there's no way of knowing how to help them, really. Except, as I explained to Moonglosa, you sit and chat to them, really. The next level up is what we call an echo. Now, an echo, it repeats over and over and over the same thing. So you'll see it walking down a certain passage from one side to the other. And it never does anything else. You can't interact with it, it can't interact with you, and it never appears anywhere else, only on that spot doing the same thing over and over. So very weak. It's visible, often not very visible, but that's all. That's your lot. The next level up is when it can make noises and be seen. And those ghosts are able to move anywhere and vary their routine within the area that they're haunting. So they're a lot stronger. It's a case whereby if you were to try and interact with them, they could respond dependent on how much energy they've got in varying ways. Now, the highest level of energy for a ghost, and the one which is the biggest problem, is what we call a Poltergeist, from the German, noisy spirit. Now, those are the ones that can actually interact with the physical world. And they are a problem because normally the ones that have that much energy have been created by that much emotion. And to be in a state of that much emotion, it's usually anger or hatred. It's very seldom that it's good energy. So when those ones manifest, because they can affect the physical world, and it's because they're angry or something like that, they are generally negative and malevolent, which means, yes, migraines, scratches on the body, pushing you, hitting you, throwing objects around, messing with electricity and things. Those are the problem ones, and they're usually bad simply because of the amount of emotion required. Usually it's negative. Human nature. If people are very happy when they die, they're usually pretty chill and they just move on, so they don't make ghosts. Rodolfo. I think we have somebody who doesn't agree, but that's right, Rodolfo. If that is your belief, tell us what you think. We always do appreciate comments, though we do ask, of course, that you are polite. Are ghosts aware that they are dead? If so, do ghosts try their hardest to reach out? Interesting question, I would say. In my experience, there has been a number of ghosts that didn't know they were dead. And once they did, they realized that they could and should move on and therefore did. Much thanks for all those likes there. Love it, love it. Um, so, on the one hand, some don't know, and when they do, they move. Um, some know and don't care because they're here for a reason, especially in those cases where they're angry and want revenge for some reason. They know damn well that they're dead and they know why they're dead and they've got somebody that they're after. So, in that regard, um, it varies with the ghost, just like people, I suppose. Um, make of as you will. So, certainly, there is a lot that can be said. It's never quite as clear cut as all that, but still, these things are so, if that makes sense. So, 100%. I think you will find that just like um, just like people, 90% of ghosts are harmless. Um, they're chill. It's the few that are nasty. How do ghosts physically look like? Okay, this is an interesting question, and I will give you this answer. I have encountered in my life ghosts that were nothing more than an orb, a little glowy bit. I have encountered ones that were shadows, not separate shadows that look like a shadow person type shadow, but like a shadow against a wall, but with nobody to cast it. I have encountered shadows that are like shadow person type shadows. Um, I've encountered ones that look like a person, but you can kind of see through them and you realize pretty quickly, hold on, buddy, that ain't normal. But I have encountered ones that I can't tell the difference from them being the living until they do something that no normal person could do. And I suddenly realize, hey, wait a minute. So they can look like a lot of things. Now, in general, a ghost will look like what they were. So if you are a young man with blonde hair and blue eyes, that's pretty much what you are going to be like because that's what you are. Um, on rare occasions, you will find that it seems that you can get a I think of it as an accompanying manifestation. Okay, so by and large, for example, a train is not alive. So you can't get the ghost of a train, which means you would immediately then say, well, hold on, what about ghost trains? Well, what it is, it's the ghost of a person. The train has manifested because of the belief of the ghost. So the train is not a ghost. It's an accompanying manifestation to a ghost. Why aren't there animal ghosts? The answer is occasionally it seems there can be, generally not. And the reason is animals are not complicated. Uh, they know when they're dead and they move on as they should. There has to be an extreme emotional content at their death. And by and large, animals don't have that. When they're done, they're done. They don't care, which might make them a lot cleverer than people in that regard. Make of it as you will. However, I have encountered stories of animal ghosts where the animal returned to say goodbye to their owner or returned to be with their owner because they really, really loved their owner and they stuck around for quite a long time. So, yes, there are animal ghosts, but they're much, much rarer. And ghost objects, like a ghost train, isn't a ghost itself. Um, Notification, old chum. Why would you say such things? You're being bad to me. But yes, as things go, that's the basic understanding, if you will. I don't know if there is much else that we can say in that regard. You get ghosts generally only from living things. So if it's not a living thing, you won't get a ghost. Does that make sense? Could a benevolent ghost haunting a person affect that person's surrounding? Again, you're back to the problem of the strength of the ghost and the amount of emotional attachment. Potentially, yes. Potentially. Absolutely, it could. If it has enough energy to be able to, then in that case, sure. Would they? I suppose it depends if it's in keeping with or suitable to what it is they're trying to achieve. Would that make sense? Um, being benevolent, I would imagine. No, they probably wouldn't generally. However, and though I don't have personal experience of this myself, here's a story for you. There has been occasions where people have told me that a ghost came and told them not to do something. In many cases, they didn't realize it was a ghost until afterwards. And when they didn't do one thing or another, um, they later found out it would have been really bad for them had they, if that makes sense. In which case, what you're actually talking about is that they have affected in order to help somebody. So, yes, it's possible. I think it's rare. I'm going to be honest with you and say to you that by and large, I'm what you would call something of a cynic in this regard. I think most stories people tell, at the very least, have been elaborated on for the telling of the story. And quite a lot of them are complete rubbish. Because that's people for you. We like stories and we like to tell them, and we like to embroider the stories and make them exciting. But just because people do that doesn't mean that they aren't real. Can ghosts still miss the physical world? I don't know the answer to that. I wonder. I suppose it is reasonable to think that they might, because after all, they were still people. But on the other hand, as a great many people have said, also probably not, because they've no longer got a physical body, therefore they wouldn't really care about physical things. So, hard to say. We do know, of course, in a great many situations, um, you've got people that have a strong reverence for the ancestors, for example, as in South Africa we have, and in many other countries, and they absolutely do leave um, presents and offerings, including food, for the ancestors. And it is said that the ancestors consume the spiritual aspect of what is given, even if they can no longer eat the physical. So maybe they do. Hard to say, I suppose. Um, I think it would be kind of sad if they do. Bit harsh. But I suspect it depends as well on what holds them here, to be honest. I think that may have quite a lot to do with it as well. So there's that. I don't really know, to be honest. Much thanks for the loves there. You are wondrous. Is it possible to talk to a ghost and convince them to move on? Yes, I have done it. As short and sweet as that, yes. I have absolutely managed to be able to explain to somebody, listen, buddy, you're dead, you need to move on, and they did. But they were a very benevolent ghost, and they were actually just quite frightened and not sure what they were doing. So, in that regard, they were happy to go. However, I once went to an exorcism along with this official exorcist, and it was a very, very, very angry poltergeist. It didn't like people there at all. It set fire to the curtains, it threw things around, and an exorcism was done. It did not work. A second and a third was done, and it still didn't go. And before we could go in full guns blazing and do a very serious, hardcore version of the exorcism, the local chief stepped in, and he gathered all the men of the clan there, and he basically said to them, right, over there, that piece of land now belongs to that family. You build a house there right now. I want it done by the end of the week. And all the men in the community got together. They built the house like in a week. Same size, same shape, same rooms as in the house the family was in, where the haunting was. Um, Stocked it with everything they needed, moved the family into that house, went to their old house and burnt it to the ground and salted the ground. And that ended the haunting. And I must say, it was a pretty nice chief to step in and deal with it the way he did, giving them a whole brand new house and everything, so that he looked after his people. He was a pretty good thing. How does an exorcism work? Okay. It's not an answer, but this is the answer I'm giving you. It depends on the religion. All different religions have all different versions of what you should do, how you should do it, and the way it should work, and who is allowed to do it. Now, I know the setup for the Catholic Church. I know that it is largely different in quite a lot of different religions, and I'm just talking the major ones. So it would depend on your religion. Now, it is argued that a non religious person could do the exorcism if they were trained using means available to a secular person. They say, and I'm throwing the disclaimer out that I do not advise you trying this at home for a lot of very, very, very good reasons. Using things like silver and salt and oils and things, you can exorcise whatever is there. I know in the Catholic Church, an exorcism is not your local priest rocking up and saying a few prayers. It's done by a very specific person who's trained in a very specific way that follows a very specific set of rules and is done over a long period. It's not knock up half an hour, off we go home. It takes weeks, even months, to do a complete exorcism. It is considered to be inherently very dangerous, and there's even a ton of stuff prior to you have to do before you even go anywhere near the place that's supposed to be haunted. So it's a long and involved process. Um, how does it work in terms of what is well? Theoretically, there are things that take away the energy from a ghost, that drain it of its ability to manifest. Those things should stop a ghost. However, it is generally thought that a proper holy ritual, in other words, you get God involved, whatever your belief might be, and God deals with it because he knows better. And that's generally considered to be a much safer, wiser way of dealing with it. If you were to say, yes, but I found on the internet the following things will get rid of a ghost and I'm going to do it, yeah, you're going to get your ass kicked. And there are a lot of different reasons for that. I don't know, is that an answer sufficient? Would I want to try an actual exorcism myself on a malevolent ghost? No. Can a ghost possess you? Potentially. I'm inclined to think for myself, no. They can haunt you and they can bugger around with you. They can't possess you, generally, because they're a ghost. However, if you're talking something that is not a ghost but a spirit, that's a different story. So, demonic possession, sure. However, if you are willing, and I cannot imagine why you would be, you can allow a ghost to speak or act through you. I personally would consider that to be an incredibly bad idea. And I really don't think it should ever be done because of the nature of these things. If you are very, very well trained, perhaps it is different. The arguable problem is, where does one go to train to learn to manage ghostly possession, etc.? Um, there are not many schools around, as far as I know. Which, yeah, that makes it just a touch difficult, I think. Does that answer your question? I'm not really sure. Um, but I'm inclined to think. So if somebody's possessed, it's probably not a ghost. Okay, I'm glad we were able to cover that. What else would you like to know about that I might possibly be able to answer, I hope? Are there things other than ghosts? Yes. Have I seen one or two? Yes. But you can tell. Ghosts don't bother me. They've never made me afraid. They've made me feel a little cold at times, but they don't scare me. Ghosts aren't really a problem. There are, however, things out there that I think are not ghosts, and they do scare quite a lot because you can tell the difference. If you have ever actually really encountered something evil, it would not in any manner or form be a question. You would know. You will know. Cupid, hello, how are you? Are you well? That's an interesting question. Are doctors the most haunted of all? I actually don't know the answer to that, and I would be curious to ask a doctor. I suspect because 90% of the time, if you think about it, when you go into a hospital, you don't actually know who the doctor is. So I would be inclined to think no, because it isn't the doctor that we're upset with. So in that regard, it's more the hospital that the emotion or the illness that the emotional impact is addressed at rather than the doctor themselves. Unless, of course, the patient realizes that the doctor deliberately did something to harm them and cause them to pass on, in which case, well, that might be different. So I think the haunting of a person generally is very, very rare. Can an evil person become a benevolent ghost? I'm going to say no, but not because of the difference in evil becoming good type thing, but largely because if you're a thoroughly nasty person when you die, you stay that way. People are people, not because of any connection to ghosts or the paranormal, purely because people are people. And if your last remaining feeling is negative, you're probably going to stay an arsehole. Can I say more than that? So yeah. Hey Cupid, how
Hello,
you doing?
I'm doing good.
I'm glad to hear that. Welcome, welcome. So have you got any ghost stories for us?
Mm, I don't have any, but I can think of some.
Well, if you've heard of any good ones, you can let us know if you would like to.
Okay.
Jason, it's been fantastic having you, and thanks for the questions. They've really made this live quite amazing. You're welcome anytime. Join us again, hey? Have a good night. But yes, Cupid, go on.
Okay. Can I ask a question
Oh,
real
yes.
quick?
Oh, yes.
Are ghosts real?
I'm going to say yes.
Hmm. Do they usually come at day and night?
Now, that's an interesting question, okay? Because at least in stories, they generally only come out at night. And my problem with that, and no, I haven't got a definitive answer to this yet. My problem with that is surely if you're a ghost haunting a place, you haunt it all the time. So why are they seen at night and not in the day? And the answer, as I've encountered it, is this: they generally can haunt it at all times of the day, but we are, as human beings, more likely to notice a ghost at night when we are more scared
Hmm.
rather than during the day.
Do they usually come in the light when it's night or in the dark?
Well, they say in the dark, but I personally think that's more because we expect it then. However, there is a certain amount of argument that says that there are times, whether it's a time of day or a time of year, where it is easier for a ghost to appear. If that is true, then maybe at certain times of night it's easier for them to appear than it is during the day. It's possible, but I don't know for certain.
Okay.
But if it makes you feel any better, in my experience and in all of my research, almost all ghosts ever can't hurt you. It takes a very, very, very specific set of situations for a ghost to actually be able to cause you any harm. And it's very rare. So normally you don't have to worry.
Okay. Thank you.
It's a pleasure. Okay, so we are actually nearing the end of our live. We have got about 2 minutes to go, sadly, and it really has been an absolutely amazing, amazing live. It's been a huge amount of fun, and I hope you have enjoyed it as much as I have. We've had a lot of cool discussions, um, and I think that it is fair to say that we have learnt a very great deal more about what might be out there. We didn't even touch on the Ukraine as we were going to for this live, but do not worry because we will carry it on tomorrow night in that one instead, because there are some good stories there, and I think that we certainly will go and get more about all the varying things. But I think that we have definitely covered some really cool stories and very good questions, which I think is very important. Uh, if you're going to talk about these things, you need to be able to ask the questions and at least discuss possible answers. Is that not the case? So I think it's been one of the best lives we've had in a very long time, and absolutely, I thank all of you greatly for joining me. I hope you've had as much fun as I have. But cold as it is and late as it is, we are going to end off. Remember that we get together at 10 o'clock South African time. That is GMT +2. We love to have questions and hearts and gifts and subscriptions and more, and you are more than welcome to join us. The only rule we have, of course, is that please, 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 if you are rude on the live, you will get the boot. We're here to enjoy, to learn, to discuss, to find out more about other countries and interesting stories, um, and certainly not to promote any nastiness. And with that said, I shall bid you all good night. Sleep deep, sleep sweet, but sleep with one eye open, and perhaps keep that holy object near at hand, because sometimes, my dear friends, those things that go bump in the night might very, very well go bump for you.